Since we kind of have a good crowd already, we'll go ahead and just start recapping. I'm sure everyone's here for the design exchange, but if you're not just here for the workshop and to learn more about design thinking and strategic design, you're at the right place. So if you haven't already signed in, we'll pull this up later for you to sign in at the end of the event. Just to recap, the design exchange is basically a design challenge, but it's more about exchanging ideas. And so we were asking you guys, is there a design or problem that you want to solve at the prompt reveal? And the prompt was that to design a product, solution, or art piece to create a positive impact in the local community. And the three factors of it was to be unique with it, to make it innovative, right? And then have an impact on that local, your stakeholders that you're looking at. And so that's the prompt, just a fresh reminder. We also have the timeline, of course. If you haven't joined our Discord, this is just a timeline to refresh our memory of what's happening today. It's the Design Exchange Workshop. We have amazing guest speakers from Bottle Rocket and Intuit, and they're gonna come up to share those very valuable knowledge to help you with this whole experience during the Design Exchange. So next week, this Friday, we'll start sending out a link where you can make an appointment with mentor, AIGA alumni, so you can get feedback on your projects from multiple perspectives. And then mandatory check-in is on February 25th. It's we're gonna send out a form. Really, you let us know, give us an idea of how your project's going, what is it going to be. So if you have anything that needs help with setting up on the day of the judging and presentation night, we can help facilitate that. Okay, so make sure you do complete that mandatory check-in on February 25th by midnight. So that's the timeline. So we'll go ahead into it. I would like to invite our first speaker, Ari Liu, our product designer at Intuit, and just a little bit about Ari. She's studied urban planning and design in college, and then switched to HCI, human-computer interaction, during her master's study. She graduated in 2020 from the University of Maryland and started working at Securonics as a product designer, designing cybersecurity software. She joined Intuit in 2021 and has been working there since then. So I'll pass it on to her. I'm going to switch to your PowerPoint. Yeah. Everyone, give us a
I'm Ari, and nice to meet you all today. Thanks for coming, and also thanks for having me today. So I'll be sharing design thinking at Intuit, and we call it design for delight. Basically, our secret weapon to do better innovation and also continuously try to delight our customers. So I'll be talking about firstly what is design thinking and why you should care about it. And then I'll introduce design for delight in detail, let you know what's included in this process. And most importantly, I'll be sharing some tools that will come in handy for the design exchange competition you're going to participate in. And I'll also highlight some important watch-outs so that you can avoid mistakes when you are using those tools so that you can get the best result out of it. So to start with, what's design thinking? Usually when we talk about this word, we think about this process in which you firstly try to understand your user, what problem you're trying to solve for, and then you explore possible solutions to solve that problem, and finally you test your solution and implement it if you find it's the right one. Oh yes.
Flip it to your sleeve, make sure developer down in the pocket. And the microphone, the little one, flip it up like as close to your mouth as possible, point it towards your mouth preferably. And once it's there,
Sure.
I can hold it, it's fine. Okay, cool. Yeah. Is it working? I think so. Cool, yeah, so this is basically what we're referring to when we talk about design thinking. And it's just a framework. You don't necessarily have to follow this. And the main idea behind design thinking is to be user-centered and be creative while you're exploring the possible approaches. So you might be wondering, why do I need this? Why can't I just design whatever I feel like to? Well, I thought about that before, and then I realized that there's a difference between good art and good design. So when you're making art piece, you can focus on self-expression, because the aim of an art is to evoke strong emotions from your audiences. But that's not the same thing with a good design. So a design needs to be functional. It needs to be able to solve problems in the right way. So with the design, and because you're solving a problem, that means you are not only designing for yourself, you're designing for a group of people who might come from different backgrounds, who have different preferences or different mental models than you. So that means you cannot design only based on your assumptions or your past experiences. So how can you generate a good design in that case? That means you need to do some research, you need to gather some data from the people you're designing for. And in the end, you need to be able to kind of prove that why the solution you have would be the best one. And taking the design exchange competition as an example, the final solution you come up with can definitely be something like an art piece, like a drawing or sculpture. But the most important thing is you should be able to articulate your logical thinking behind that final deliverable, like how you got there based on what kind of data and based on what you got from your user. So that being said, coming up with a good design can be complicated because you need to learn so many things, and sometimes you need to deal with a lot of uncertainties. So that's when design thinking comes into place, because it will offer you a defined process for you to navigate through that complicated situation and with confidence. Yeah. So now we know what design thinking is and why it's important. Let's take a look at how Intuit does it. So we have a framework that we call Design for Delight. It's basically a different way we present this design thinking process. And we categorize it into 3 stages. In the first one, you define the problem and by forming deep empathy. And in the second stage, you do the ideations by going broad and then going narrow. That means you brainstorm a lot of ideas first and then pick the top ones. And in the last part, you will need to do quick experimentations by prototyping and testing, because you don't want to waste resources on things that will not bring benefit. So, and just want to mention that this may not necessarily be a linear process. You might go between like different phases based on what you learned. So use it in a flexible way. So next I'm going to go through each stages and just highlight some of the tools that can be potentially useful to you for this competition. So let's take a look at the first stage, define problem. So if you start deciding what to work on, this will be the right section for you. You will want to find important unsolved problems, and how to do that is by forming deep empathy with your user. It's important because if you just ask your user what they want, a lot of time they can't articulate their pains or their needs in the most accurate way. The most cliche example is people will say they want faster horses, but in fact they want a better way to travel and commute. So how to get that understanding, how to get that empathy, there are different research methods, both from the quantitative ones and also the qualitative ones. I mainly focus on the 2 most popular ones we'll be using at Intuit. That's in-depth interviews and follow me home. It's basically contextual inquiry. So let's start with follow me homes. The name speaks for itself. Basically, it's like you follow users to their natural habitat and you observe their real behavior. So this is super powerful because if you just ask user a question, sometimes they give you an answer that they believe is true, but it's actually not. So an example is when I was in college and I had a roommate, and one day I wanted to share some snacks with him. So it's like I have this chocolate pie and this mushroom snack, which one do you prefer? And he said, I don't know because I don't snack. But then it's like you literally just finish a pack of chips, and I saw you do that every day. So in his mind, he feels like he identified himself as a healthy person, so he thinks he doesn't snack. But from my observation, that's actually not true. He enjoys snacking a lot. So you can see, only when you observe the real behavior, that's when you can get the real data and really understand your user. So how to do that? Firstly, think about what's the action or experience you want to observe, and find the end user, ask if they're willing to do so. And then during the session, firstly set up the stage. For example, if you're trying to observe someone's shopping experience, you can start by saying, well, I'm trying to learn your shopping experience, and can you just let me follow you while you're in Whole Foods? And set the goals and the rules by telling them, try to pretend I'm not here and do whatever you normally would do. And then spend most of the time observe. You can also ask the why question to dig deeper. For example, if you notice that they stopped by an aisle and they look confused, you can ask, like, I noticed you stopped. What's happening? What's going on in your mind? Why did you stop? What's confusing you? So that you can understand why behind their behavior. And in the end, wrap up by by confirming with them what you've learned to see if that's true, and also asking them if there's anything they want to add. So that's the main framework. And the next method is in-depth interviews. A lot of you might be pretty familiar with this one already. So it's basically like you ask your user a bunch of questions and then they give you answers. So you really will start by thinking about what you're trying to achieve in this interview. Think about the goals. And based on that, create this interview guide by listing out the questions you want to ask. And during the interview, you can also ask follow-up questions to dive deeper, so don't get stuck with the guide. Although it sounds straightforward, but it can be tricky to come up with the best question sometimes. So I want to do a quick quiz with you all. So let's say you are trying to help people stay healthy by letting them drink less boba. That may not be the best idea as this example because I also love boba. But let's say you're trying to figure out why they're drinking boba at the first place. So here's three options. I want to see which one do you all think is the best one. So A, what's making you drinking so much boba? And B, you just bought another boba. Was that because you were attracted by the discounts? Or C, the last time you decided to drink boba, what was behind that decision? Okay, so how many of you think that A is the best option? Raise your hand. And how many of you think B is the best one? And C? Okay, I think all of you got the idea already, but I'll go through each option anyway. So the first one, the problem with it, it's an open-ended question, so it's good, but it's too general because you're basically asking your user to summarize their behavior, like the reasons behind their behavior for you. That's too complicated. Most people are not that self-aware, and even though they can give you an answer, that might be something that sounds logical but doesn't reflect the real reason that applies to them. And the problem with B is that it's a leading question. You're already assuming that they bought it because of the discounts, and you're just confirming with them. Some people are just nice, they will agree with you anyway. So you don't want that to happen. And for C, it's great because you're trying to asking them to trace back their memory from which they can tell you more details and give you more insightful answers. So some watch outs for both methods. You can see there's a difference between follow me homes and interviews. So definitely don't make follow me homes interview. Focus on observation and try to reduce that human impact you might have on your users, so that you can observe their most natural reactions and behaviors. and encourage them to show you by doing instead of by talking. And as for interviews, as we just talked about in the quiz, firstly, don't ask leading questions, and also try to probe for more details, and ask questions that will get to the root cause. So now you gather some user data, it might be a lot of them, so you might be wondering how should I deal with this data? How can I make them to be easy to refer to later on, and also create a shared language and vision with the team. So one framework that you can use is the customer problem statement. We use it a lot at Intuit because it captures the most important things that you're trying to solve and why it's important. So it starts with, so you will be writing in your user's tone. So it'll be like, I am this type of user. I am this is the outcome I'm trying to achieve, but I'm stopped by this problem or barrier because of this root cause. And which makes me feel here you can capture the negative emotions to show how serious this problem is. So we sometimes spend a lot of time to try to phrase it right, because it can get tricky. Here I have 2 examples, and I want to see which one do you all think is the best one. So let's say you're trying to help college students to do better time management. The one on the left says, I am a 25 years old college student. I'm trying to do better time management, but I usually don't have enough time to prepare for assignments because I don't have a to-do list, so I procrastinate a lot, which makes me feel overwhelmed and frustrated. Well, that's the first one. And the second one says, I am a medical school student who is also working a part-time job. I'm trying to manage my time better to finish assignments on time and get better GPA, but I procrastinate a lot because I have so many things to do and I don't know where to start, which makes me feel overwhelmed and frustrated. The last sentence is the same. So raise your hand if you think the first one is better, and raise your hand if you think the second one is better. Cool. I'm curious, do you want to share your reason, why you think the first one's better?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
I said it mainly because I feel like it was a bit more, like what it was asking, it seemed more simplistic and like it has specific details, like because it says I don't have a to-do list, that's something specific, and the other because says I just have so many things to do, nothing more specific.
I see. That's actually a good point. You're definitely heading in the right direction. I guess it's just some nuances in the way I write it. But I think most people, I agree with most of you. I think the one on the right is better, and I'll just explain why. But thanks for sharing. And firstly, when it's trying to capture who the user is, it's capturing the most important characteristic that's relevant to the problem. Because they are a medical school student and because they work part-time job, that's why it makes the time management so difficult. So that's capturing the important characteristics. And then when it's capturing the user's goal, like I said, it's more detailed because it's also capturing the motivation behind their desire to do better time management. It's because they want to get better GPA. And the problem with the one on the left side for the root cause is that it's kind of getting into solution a little bit. It says the user is procrastinating because they don't have a to-do list. And to-do list can actually be a solution, but it may not be the best one. So we don't want to have it in the statement, and it might limit your team's creativity later on. And another thing is procrastination. We usually consider it as like a behavior, and there are deeper reasons behind that behavior. And that's captured by the one on the right side. It's because they have so many things to do, and they don't know where to start, so that's why they didn't start. And that's why they are procrastinating. So yeah, that's why the one on the right side, I believe is better. So to summarize, here's some watch outs. Firstly, write in specific, tangible, and detailed ways using full sentences. Leave solutions out and look for the root cause to the pain. Well, that's all for the first stage. And now you know the problem, you know why it's important, you know who you're solving for. You're totally ready to explore how to solve those problems. So at Intuit, we encourage people to go broad and go narrow because we believe the best way to get a good idea is to get lots of ideas and then throw the bad ones away. So you only will have a brainstorming session in which oh, by the way, you can have different problem statements if you discover different important problems. So in these brainstorming sessions, we'll firstly pick a statement to focus on, and then we'll brainstorm based on that. We'll go over some ground rules with the team. I'll mention that later, and then the team will start brainstorming as many as possible. So in those type of sessions, here are some important ground rules to ensure the creativity. Firstly, don't judge other people's ideas yet, and encourage wild ideas. Don't think about feasibility yet, and build on the ideas of others. Stay focused on the topic, one conversation at a time, be visual and go for quantity. So one watch out, apart from all the ground rules, is that be mindful to ensure diverse voices, perspectives, and personalities are expressed equally. Especially for people like me who is an introvert, it will be super hard to jump into like ongoing non-stop conversations if I don't have like a dedicated time to speak up. So it will definitely help to have a facilitator who can make sure everyone is engaged. It sounds good, it sounds fun, but it could be challenging sometimes because I just can't think of that many creative ideas sometimes. So how can I do that? How can I have that creativity mindset? Well, here I want to do a fun exercise with you all. You might be noticing you have some pens and crayons and also paper on your table, so take one. And I would like you all to draw a sunset scene. Yeah, don't overthink. Just go whatever comes to your mind when I say the word sunset.
There's crayons as well if you guys want to color it, make it colorful. Steal some. Just the primer.
Okay, so next step, I hope you all have time to finish it. It's fine if you haven't, doesn't need to be perfect. But I just want to list 5 things, and I want you to count how many of those you have in your drawing. The first one, horizon line, sun rays, trees, birds, and the last one's water. So can you show me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, how many of those do you all have? Okay. Well, some of you have all 5 of them. Yes. Okay, so now compare your drawing with the people around you, see if they're similar. And I will assume it kind of is, because you all have like similar elements.
See where it's like the pie. I don't know if it looks like this is like the wall. Emphasize.
Okay, now, coming back, can you all draw a sunset, but this time draw the one that you saw most recently and in real life. And think about who you're with, how it feels like, try to be as detailed and specific as possible. The sunset you saw most recently.
Like, not so bad. Yeah.
And when you're done, also compare this drawing with people around you. And hopefully this time will be more diverse.
That's like the least. Like the song. It comes from the mirror. So.
Oh, this is like the working
Oh, yeah, that is also. Yeah. Really sing song.
I can say that. Just driving.
Probably wasn't the last sunset I saw, but the one that sticks out.
Good, yeah. Oh, really?
Hopefully you all get an idea like how similar or different and yeah, you're probably telling the story of a software right now. So the point I'm trying to make here is that context or scenario is important. So for the first prompt, a lot of it got similar elements in your drawing, and that's because I actually give you a really general prompt. So that leads your ideation into a general place. So you're all drawing a typical sunset that you can see maybe online or in the media. I wouldn't want that to happen in the workshop or in the brainstorming session because then everyone will be generating similar ideas. That seems to be natural or common. However, the second one you're drawing, hopefully they're more diverse because you were back in the scenario when you saw that sunset. You can remember who you were with, even how the air smells like, how is the atmosphere, everything. So that gives more details in your drawing that you may need to take time to explain to other people what all those interesting elements are. So you can say when you are back into the scenario, you have more fresh, creative, and realistic ideas. So whenever you feel stuck that you can't think of more creative ideas, try bringing yourself back into a user situation, and that way you'll remember what was the environment like and what are some resources they have access or don't have access to, what are some constraints, so that way it will unlock more opportunities that you can go explore. Cool. So now that you've had a lot of ideas and you need to pick the top ones to keep working on, one tool we use at Intuit is to use this 2x2 chart. So it's basically you pick two criteria that's most relevant to the problem you're trying to solve, and you will use two axes for each of the criteria, and then you'll have the whole group to move the idea sticky notes and put them on the chart. So let's say one idea is high in criteria 1 and high in criteria 2, then you put it here. So one example maybe for this competition is, for example, you can use impact of one of your criteria, or it can be more detailed based on the problem you're trying to solve. And if you also want to make sure you have time to build some prototypes to test out, maybe you also need to consider the time and cost. So the second criteria could be like the feasibility or just cost efficiency, something like that. Awesome. So now you've got some ideas to move forward. But before you invest resources in implementing it, you definitely want to know if they're worth it. So there are a lot of experimentation methods you can use. I'll take some examples based on your needs. So let's say you need to get confidence that your solution idea will deliver benefit, but you want to do it with minimal effort possible. Then what you can do is either fast cycle sketch test or concierge test. So the first one basically means you design something with paper and sketching. So it's just the easiest way to visualize your idea so that you can show to your users and get feedback from them. And the second one example so it basically means you are creating something but you are trying to avoid making the technical part. You're trying to deliver the benefit manually in a smaller scale just to test out that concept to see if you can get buy-in from your user. So one example, I don't know if I remember all the details correct, but it's Airbnb. When they just have the idea, they need to make sure that people will be willing to rent a house from a stranger. So how they tested that out is they put a bed in a spare room in one of their employees' house and see if anyone's going to rent that room. So if people are going to do that, that proves that the hypothesis they made is true, it's feasible. And if you want to make sure whether users will actively use a solution idea, one way you can do is FICO test. So we did that at Intuit. Before we implement a new product, we build a marketing site first. by listing out all the features we are going to have for that product, but we haven't yet. And we have a call to action button to ask user if you're interested, subscribe and give us your credit card information. So if users are going to do that, that's a strong evidence to show that they will buy our product once we have it ready. So that gives us confidence to spend money to implement that product. And finally, if you already know your idea, concept are beneficial, you're just struggling with different variations to decide maybe what's the better way to present this information, what's a better way for me to design this interaction. So you can test out those variations on either low fidelity or mid fidelity prototypes or through A/B testing. And last but not least, the most important thing before this presentation is to know how you can decide whether it's successful or not. So here's another framework we use a lot. We test 4 sentences, and the first 2 captures the experiment you're going to run or the solution you're going with. And so it's written as, if we do this experiment, then this is what we're going to expect to see. Well, how can you know whether that expectation is true? You have to set metrics. That's how the last 2 sentences work. So you'll say that which will measure by certain things, and in the end, you set a specific number for the metric. So taking an example here, let's say the boba example. So let's say you design a solution to let people drink less boba. So it'll be like, with this solution, then people will stay healthy by drinking less boba, which will measure by the frequency, measured by a decrease in the frequency of people drinking boba. And the success metric will be people drink 2 times less compared to them using our solution before. But yeah, something like that. Okay, cool. That's I have a presentation today. Thank you all. Do you have any questions? If not, thanks. Again, I'll pass it to Brian.
And if you're still thinking about what question to ask, don't worry, write them down, and at the end, you get a chance to ask them.
That's good. Hi. So my name is Brian. I work for Bottle Rocket Studios here in Dallas, Texas. My title is I'm a experienced architect, which is a fancy word for strategist. A strategist is what we used to call ourselves until we decided we wanted something that kind of gave us a little bit more flexibility. But I kind of lean back into that old strategist title just because I'm here today to talk about strategic design, which is kind of our primary focus whenever we have our strategist hats on. So just real quick about me, my bio is I've been in the business for about 25 years off and on. I was lucky to roll out of college right into the web just as it was kind of kicking off, and I've been able to jump onto apps when they first rolled out the door. I've been able to do kiosks and a lot of really cool, fun stuff like that. So I've seen a lot of different projects. I've done it for a lot of different clients. And so basically what I'm going to share today is a lot of activities that we do with our clients as they come in the door and we're just starting off a project. We don't know what we don't know. We don't know an awful lot. And so we spend a couple days with the clients in a conference room for hours at a time, just putting everything onto the table and discussing things, challenging assumptions, and we have these activities that we use to kind of control that chaos, to condense it and keep it organized. Sorry, I'm making this up as I go along, so I wrote this morning. So the good news is it'll probably be super short. So that's me. So strategic design. So at a very high level, strategic design is identifying and defining the needs of the audience and your client. The client and their audience, probably a better way of putting that, to deliver an understandable and effective solution. So we're spending all of our time just problem solving, doing all the design thinking stuff that Ari was talking about a few minutes ago, worrying about the future, not just what do we need now, but based on our clients' goals, what do we need to kind of do in order to kind of build out a roadmap and get them not just today, but 6 months down the road, a year, 2 years from now. And we don't do this alone. This is not a solo sport. We work with a large internal team. We have guys who have product as part of their name. They speak business. They know all the acronyms, very buzzword compliant, great people. And their jobs are kind of pull out all the business requirements and stuff that kind of makes my head spin after a while. And then we have the technical team, and they're going to talk about all the systems that these guys use to make the magic happen, make the apps and websites do what they're supposed to do. And then there's me, and I'm kind of the connective tissue between all of them and the design team. And just basically, my goal is to be that connective tissue between a user-centered design solution, so we're looking for, and ultimately the client's vision, what their goals, what their needs are. So at a high level, that's what I do. This is a quick picture of what a discovery session used to look like in the before times when clients were able to come into our office. We would gather a room with a bunch of Post-its, a bunch of markers, and we would just go at it. Like I said, it was basically 2 days with about 6 hours at a time. They were wonderful, exhausting, but wonderful, and kind of missed them. We still do them today, but we largely do them over Zoom. So I'm used to seeing a lot of little faces in a window this big with the camera light on. And we usually run it through Miro. I don't know if you're familiar with Miro, but it's kind of an online whiteboard program. So we still have our whiteboards and our Post-its. This is all in digital form. So one of the activities we do is we start with the mission statement. We find that when you're defining a problem whenever possible, that you start with the why. You know what your why is. You have a good solid foundation that kind of helps you get to the how and the what quicker and in a more purposeful manner, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Mission statements, I think everybody kind of knows what they are these days, but a lot of companies will post them up on posters, you walk in the door, and they're largely meaningless, but they also they do work really well, I find, in these small projects. And just again, to kind of give you your why. So a mission statement is a short summary. I say about 1 to 3 sentences. That basically summarize your guiding principles, that begin to focus your goals, provide a foundation for everything you do. I like to call it my North Star. If you have your North Star, you can point towards it and everything kind of marches that direction. But that said, even though it is super important, it's not something, particularly in the early stages, you really want to spend hours and hours on. You don't need to worry about making it perfect. You just need to kind of get a good sense of where you want to go and kind of count the fact that you can come back to it and iterate on it and build on it in the future. It's going to change. You're going to know different things, at the end of the discovery session, 2 weeks from now, or as you get into the project, then you want to be able to adapt and pivot as necessary. So how do we do this? I like to use a similar sort of Mad Libs thing that Gary was showing just a second ago, where the basis is kind of a fill in the blank sentence. This is a kind of a streamlined version. I think would work for just about anything. When I'm working with clients, I give them basically I color code the Post-its. They all get a blue, a pink, and a green one to answer those 3 things. Everybody in the room gets to have an answer, has a word. They write it down. They all bring them up onto the dry erase board. We post them. We walk through them. We talk them through, and usually by the end of it, we have a pretty good understanding, pretty good alignment in terms of where we want everything to go. So I'll just read this one out loud. So basically, our mission is what you're trying to achieve. What is your purpose? Where are you driving? Who are you doing it for? So for your target audience, and then what are you going to do to get there? So what is the service or the good that you're going to provide? I have a quick example down here down at the bottom. I'm a huge proponent for all things accessibility at BottleRocket. It's a little bit of a black box for a lot of people, so I am working hard to, well, I'll just read it. So as an advocate for users with disabilities, my mission is to make accessible design easy to understand and easy to implement for our design team through a suite of, whatever it takes, basically templates, tools, training materials, just basically just give them what they need in order to make good, accessible, friendly design. So that's the mission statement. I'll kind of pause there. Are any questions on any of this? Cool. I'm gonna do that as I go along. I hope you don't mind.
For mission statement, how do you suggest that it should be brief, or can it be? Is there a certain length that you are required for a mission statement?
I recommend about 1 to 3 sentences. You don't want it to be too overwrought, but you want to make sure you give yourself enough space that it's super clear. I mean, this one's going to generate exactly 1 sentence. When we're working with clients and things are a little hairier, sometimes that'll bloat a little bit in the event, but if you're not careful, it just turns into word salad. So I like to keep them short and as focused as possible. But that's kind of me, that's the way I write. It's not really a right or wrong way to do it. So, do you have a question?
Oh, I was going to ask, do you create your mission statement before, after once you do your research about your audience and the service that you're doing?
We do, but we also, again, it's not written in stone, so it's a good thing to be, if you find something different, you felt like you need to adjust it, by all means adjust it. We actually do it at the end of these long 2-day sessions, mostly because it's a great, whatever the opposite of an icebreaker, it's a good kumbaya moment in the day when we all kind of get together and talk about where we want to go, and everybody kind of walks out of the room with a purpose. We felt like we've done a good job, so we tend to do it, and that also gives us enough time to kind of marinate on all the things that everybody knows in the room, all that information just kind of regurgitated, out in the open. I won't use the word regurgitated ever again. I promise. Any other questions? Cool. The second thing I want to talk about a little bit are personas. I don't know if you've run into these guys before. They are, another tool we use early. They are another thing, much like mission statements, that you can refine as you go along. There are different levels of personas. Early on we keep them super simple. We call them proto-personas. We're mostly aligning on assumptions more than anything else. So definition of a persona, it is a personification. It's an avatar, if you will, representing a group, in my case users, but it could be any sort of audience that share certain demographics, attitudes, needs, anything that they kind of have in common. And we use them to provide insight into their mindset, their behaviors, their needs. This is another way to get into their shoes and walk a mile, so you have a better understanding that whether or not the product you are building is going to suit them one way or the other. They're great because it's by giving them a face, it's a good way to keep your audience from just kind of getting lost in the mix, which can happen if you're not careful. So we have kind of a summer template, again, with the Post-its in the dry erase board. That's how we roll. And there's basically just kind of 4 quadrants. I've kind of simplified here from what we would do in a digital space, but we spend a little bit of time just kind of giving this person identity, just kind of give them some demographics that kind of speak to that group in a very general way. And it doesn't have to be terribly specific. And honestly, that's kind of the fun part. People throw out names, usually naming the neighbor or whatever. And but those are fairly specific. And then we kind of get over to the unique insights. And these are a little more general. These are just things that kind of make them different from the other segments, if you will, of people that you might be talking to. And we usually build 2 or 3 of these, depending upon the project. And those are things, that's where you get into things like they have a roommate who has a lot of cats and sleeps in too late, so they're always a little tired and grumpy. Whatever it kind of speaks to what makes the user tick, what motivates them to use your product or behave the way they do. That's a terrible example, but you get the idea. And then basically, we have 2 sections, basically what are their turn-ons and turn-offs. What do they like about using whatever kind of product that you're building? If it's e-commerce, they might like the fact that you make their favorite brand easy to find, it's easy to locate how much it costs, easy to add to the cart, you can check out however you want, but maybe they don't like the fact that, well, you can't check out however you want, you can only pay using Visa. Well, I don't like using Visa. I don't like the fact that it's difficult to figure out how much shipping is until it's almost too late. Those sorts of things. And again, these are kind of digital types of likes and dislikes, but they really apply to just about anything out there. That's a persona in a nutshell. Is that Is that clear? I think I had an example on the previous screen. I didn't really pay any attention to it. But this is one I built for an insurance company, and it just kind of, so this was a little later phase than what I just showed you there. This is after we've done some research. So we've come in much later. We've done a lot of our qualitative interviews with the users, so we have a very clear idea of what their pain points are like, what their, we've done some empathy discussions in terms of, they are kind of happy at this moment that something actually worked really well for them, but they're a little depressed that they have to do things at certain points. This stuff is kind of later down the road. It isn't something you need to do right out of the gate. Again, this is kind of what we call a qualified persona. But everything above that, the pain points, the values, we have some quotes that we actually took from the interviews. But anyways, this kind of gives you an idea that we start with this, and then as we kind of get into our research over time, we kind of back it up. We back it up a slide, and that's where we land eventually. And then eventually these things can get absolutely crazy with the data and whatnot. But that's persona. So again, I'll pause for questions.
So I know that there's like personas, there's user stories, and there's also user journey mapping. Do you say that one is more important than the other, or are they all a part of like an integrated process?
They're all equally important. So the personas kind of give you the hero of the journey. The journey, of course, is the steps they take as part of the process to complete whatever they're trying to complete. And then the user stories are what we use as we develop it in order to make sure that we are, making sure all these things are in line. They're all super important. I recommend all three. Of all of them, the personas are probably the ones that are least important, but we have long and hard, passionate discussions about that already. I know. I'm on team persona.
I'm on team persona. You're good.
All right. I'm sorry.
Okay, so it's talking a little bit about personas. So many businesses feel that they know who their user is through like data and statistics. So how do you make a persona relevant when they don't think it's necessary since they know them already?
It's pretty rare that they push back real hard. Often they come in thinking they know their persona better than they do, and a lot of times you just want to align on assumptions. So maybe the marketing person has seen their personas, but say the developers or key stakeholder like the CMO or something like that, they have no clue what's going on, and so they will bring a different perspective. So usually it's still valuable to kind of go through that process again. There's also always another segment that they haven't really dug into. So there's another thing we'll do sometimes. Okay, well, this one's super important, so we want to kind of cover on what you know, and still go ahead and maybe not rebuild a persona, but just kind of talk about them a little bit, but then find a different segment that we can kind of dig into. So we've talked about the, empty nester who's, I'm thinking about the insurance. So we have the empty nester. They no longer have to worry about insuring their kids. They're actually kind of thinking about the future. They need things to be super easy, super secure. They have very different needs than the person who's just rolled out of school, and they need, they need something cheap. They just come off their parents' insurance. They don't know what they're looking at. We need to make it simple and easy to understand, and just basically do as much handholding as we possibly can. So, sometimes they have both of those. Sometimes they don't. There's all sorts of shades of gray in between. It's rare that they push back real hard, and when they do, you just kind of roll with it a little bit. And it's a huge "it depends" answer, I'm afraid, but. Competitive analysis. I think this is fairly self-explanatory. So this is an opportunity for you to learn what's already out there, what's been done, what the trends are, what's working, what's not working. And in the end, it allows you to design strategically so that you ultimately stand out from the competition and avoid any potential problems. This is another one where I suggest you start with a relatively small number of potential competitors. I think did I put a number in there? It's a 2 to 4. I did put a number there. About 2 to 4 is a great place to start. You can always build on that over time. They don't have to be direct competitors. If they're in a field doing something similar but different, then often you can really find great inspiration doing that. The simple way of doing this is just start with a simple pro-con list. Ask yourself the questions I have here. How are they doing whatever they're doing? Is everyone doing the same thing? Are there consistent patterns? Are there things that you should be leaning into and not being necessarily disruptive? Are they doing it well? Should it be disrupted? If it's something you can think of a way of doing better and easier, then great. What does their audience think? Are there reviews out there you can tap into, or you get some good follow-up for reviews later or surveys? And then what, if anything, sets them apart? So what makes brand X brand X? This is always a great question to ask. I think I don't have a great example here. This was, again, with the insurance company. I did this in tandem with a business analyst. They went through the apps and they actually listed all the features in a pro-con list in a spreadsheet that I don't have access to anymore. I kind of looked at it through the lens of what I could find in the marketplace. So this is basically information I pulled from the App Store, the Google Play Store. So this is how they position themselves, what features they talk about. So I have an idea of what they think is important to their users. What they show in terms of screens can be very telling. And then, of course, I have the user reviews over here, not just the value, but I kind of went through and I gathered some statements that I felt were representative of a lot of things that I'm seeing across the board and kind of highlighting them. So when I talk through them with the client, I say, well, here's what they do well, here's what they do poorly, just based on what their customers are saying. A lot of different ways of doing this, but like I said, at its heart, just start a quick and easy pro-con list, all the features they offer, whether or not they do it well, and then just go from there. So that's competitive analysis in a nutshell. Again, pausing for questions.
Is this something more like that's aligned with the role of like a UX designer or UX researcher? Because I've also heard like business analysts being more involved in this than.
This is one that's easy to kind of delegate and share an awful lot. I happen to do this one, but the BA, they're great at those spreadsheets, so by all means let them knock themselves out. I like being part of the process though, because I like knowing these things firsthand. If we're going in deep, we will, particularly on digital platforms, we will run what we call a heuristic evaluation. So we're looking at things through the lens of some well-established rules of whether or not they are doing things quote unquote correctly. Is it accessible? Is it easy to navigate? Is it helpful? Where it needs to be helpful, et cetera, et cetera. So I definitely like being part of it if I can, but all things being equal, or things are not equal, and I'm super busy, I will pass it on to somebody else. Any other questions? And the last one, and it's a little bit of an overlap area. Fortunately, she talked about different kinds of research than I am. I'm glad she went into the deeper, more involved stuff. I just thinking about a 3-week project and how I would go about researching something where I just don't have a whole lot of time. I'm going to suggest your basic guerrilla research. A little different than the follow me home stuff. This is less. Observational stuff is great. I think that is actually also a great thing to do here. But just have informal conversations with people about how they feel about whatever you need, whatever you're trying to produce, whatever that goal may be. Talk with your audiences early. Talk to them often. Talk to as many of them as you can basically find budget and time for, is my general recommendation. Strike up a conversation, ask what they like, what they don't like, whether it's important to them. And again, this is much like personas, or even the mission statement. It's a great way to keep your audience at the forefront of a lot of discussions. Otherwise, they kind of get swept behind and everything becomes about the business and what the business wants, and that's not user-centered design. It's not going to make anybody happy. Make everybody happy in the long term. And keep in mind that things change, just like what I'm saying on the mission statement. So come back and talk to people again later if possible. So that's kind of all I really have on research. There's the 4 things I can think of in terms of what I do on a daily basis during a strategic engagement or discovery process or anything where we're just trying to work out how we can help our business clients meet their whatever user base, whatever audience they're trying to reach in the best way possible. There are others that are very specific to mobile. A lot of them get very businessy, and I can't really do them justice here today. But anyways, I'll pause one more time if there's any other questions or thoughts. Otherwise, I think I got through this super duper quick. So, awesome. Thanks, guys.
Right. What's really interesting about your presentation versus the presentation? I'm sorry, I keep it late. I didn't hear you. Ari. And you're from Intuit. Yeah. So Intuit
the work that Ari's doing is in-house, right? So she may or may not have a little bit of flexibility in terms of who she talks to, who the customers are, what the timelines look like. At Bottle Rocket, we're an agency, so we work with a lot of different clients, and it's almost like a different story every time you work with a client, right? And you probably have internal clients as well. I thought some of those questions around personas were really insightful. Brian did a great job answering them. Sometimes we'll have a client that says, we already have personas, here you go, and you look at it in its marketing segment, and you're like, crap, okay, well this is some data that I can probably use to inform a persona. It's not a real behavioral persona. So you have to do some fancy footwork to either extrapolate what those behaviors are, or to Brian's point, do some imaging. Ideally, we have an interview phase, or I'm sorry, a research phase where we do that contextual work, right? Just like you said so eloquently. What people do, what they say they do, what they think they do, are all really different. So what they like, what they are going to tell you they like is very different. So having that opportunity to do those observations are very valuable. A lot of times when cost is an issue, our clients will say, I don't want to pay for research. Here's all of our analytics data. You can derive the behaviors from this. And sometimes we can, and sometimes we can't. We do the best we can with what we've got. But each scenario is very different. And as hard as we try to sell, right, the right way to do things, we find ourselves, and we did a great job explaining this, pivoting, my favorite business words, as the changes come in, as the constraints come in, really doing the best you can with the opportunities that you're giving from that client to get to where they want to be. So a lot of what Brian described are working sessions with the client where we're actually relying on stakeholders to tell us their perspective, what their customers want. 90% of the time, it's 70% wrong, right? But we use that as a starting point that we can then validate and review and evaluate as we go through the process. And the worst thing that can happen is they opt not to do testing, they opt not to do research. That's going to be tested in market. If you launch something, you're going to know if your users don't like it because they're not going to use it. So ideally, we can prevent that happening for our clients and get them to those areas of success with that involvement from design and users. So absolutely, there's a lot of great tips and tricks here. I guess the only constant is in uncertainty and changing personalities, but it's very dynamic. And I didn't mean to minimize the work that you do, Ari, because I know you have internal clients that are helping you all kinds of pressures on it as well. But it's interesting to think about different contexts in which we all work as experienced designers.
I often find that when the client comes to me with what they feel like is a fully baked persona, I will break that apart, and those different components usually will form a lot of the research that we'll do when we get to the qualitative stages. So here's what they think they know about the audience that they're trying to reach. We can use this as an opportunity to confirm or deny, or basically allow the audience have their say in terms of what they actually do.
So I actually have a question. So it seems like from the two presentations, so design thinking, I wonder, can you do design thinking and that strategic part both concurrently? Because like for all the participants, they have about 3 weeks, right? And some of them have teams, some of them is only one person working on everything. So what should they focus on?
I mean, I think they run hand in hand. I don't think you really have one without the other. A lot of strategic thinking that I talked about really, when she was showing all of her cyclical iterations, the loop-de-loops at the very beginning, most of what I talked about there was right at the very beginning of that, except for the little research piece towards the end. But all the rest of that stuff is equally important, and she covered off. I was relieved that actually you hit entirely different points than I did, and it was entirely accidental and very welcome. So I thought we covered, between the two of us, I think we covered an awful lot of what I do.
I actually also have more questions.
Ask away.
So during the participants are going to be pitching on the presentation night, and since they'll have less than 5 minutes to pitch, I wonder, do you guys have any suggestions what they should focus on? You definitely framing the problem from the design thinking, what type of research they use, what data, but also you mentioned the competitive analysis. What are some key things you guys use to talk to your clients and pitch those ideas?
Yeah, I mean, most of what I talked about kind of lay the foundation for those later discussions, and they probably just based on the criteria I saw when I was looking through your deck earlier, I think there are some things they would want to touch on, but I think of course they would want to focus more on the solution. So kind of set up the problem, talk about this is our audience, here's what we heard, what we want, and then talk about the solution and keep referring back to that over time is what I recommend. And if you have time to do research and then you've been able to validate or invalidate that, whatever the case may be, there are things that you would do differently in future phases or whatever. I think that's all very doable in a relatively short span. So kind of use what I've been talking about a lot to kind of set the story, set the stage, and maybe wrap it up a little bit, and then everything else that Eric has talked about kind of fills that warm, gooey center where all the magic happens. I don't know if you agree with that or not.
Yeah, I agree. I just want to add that you said the students will have less than 5 minutes to take the work. I think what we're going to focus on is more like make it clear what problem you're solving, like say the rational process you use to come up with that final result, like use data to map it out where you think that's the best solution possible, and better to show that you consider different possibilities instead of just go with whatever comes to your mind first, like the solution, so that we know you try to get the best solution possible. Thank you.
Anytime you have data to back up your solution, you're in a much stronger position than you would be otherwise.
Another one is just completely kind of off track from the design exchange. This whole challenge is that, well, it's more related to my project, but one of the project I'm working on is utilizing the UX research part to alleviate homelessness in Dallas. And some of the struggle challenges I've ran into is that, talking to everyone in this room is completely different. Talking to individuals that are homeless. And so do you guys have any suggestion besides I learned the follow me home, which is like inquiry, contextual. I think I'm gonna try that, but do you guys have any tips on how I can further, gather data from them? Because obviously I've been spending time just to build trust and friendship in order to talk and conversate with them, but it's time consuming for sure. And I wonder if there's any suggestions on the design research methods that I can do to gather more data from them. So
I would say one thing you can do is probably secondary research. So I did that before, like when I had looked at the resources. Before I joined into it, they asked me to do a chart, like because I'm looking for accountant, and I know no one I knew was an accountant. So I basically watched some YouTube videos to see accountants talking about their daily life. So I don't know if homeless in Dallas will be different from like homeless people in other place, but if the differences is not that much, maybe you can also look at like documentaries or any online resources you can find out them talking about their life. That's also one way to get to know them when you have limited resources and timeline.
Yeah, the follow me home is really good for differentiating between what they say and what they actually do. Those two things don't always necessarily match. She used the boat example and the chips example of it. But yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're already on kind of the right path. If you've you've already had some conversation with them, they're comfortable with you, you follow them, they don't feel threatened anyway. That's hard to do even with not homeless people. Just old Joe's walking through a 7-Eleven, which is something I had to do in a past life. It's an art to do it without being creepy. And just kind of have a kind of a general plan of what you want to learn kind of going into it. Alex, I know early on you often don't know what you don't know, but the secondary research kind of help inform that an awful lot. So just kind of go in and if you do have a chance to talk to them, have a nice conversation with them. Just see what their needs are firsthand. That's always beneficial as well. A lot of keep it up.
I would recommend, sorry.
Okay.
When you're thinking about your problem statement, think about how to keep it as narrow as possible so that you can come up with a really meaningful solution, right? So I know you're already working on it. Maybe instead of, I'm just going to use your example, figuring out a way to end homelessness in Dallas. Maybe it's figuring out how to meet the needs of homeless kids who are in school, right? Like thinking about and I'm not taking away from your project at all, but thinking about what you're going to be able to accomplish in that 3-week period, constraining the problem in such a way that it's manageable and you can actually deliver a solution to in that short time is going to be, you're going to find that that's going to be an important thing. So you can even show, maybe you come up with a big problem statement and then say, okay, I want to end homelessness in Dallas. Here's where we're going to start. We're going to start by solving the problem of how to care for homeless kids when they're in school or something like that. Think about how to phase it out and what problem is the juiciest and most exciting in that constrained model that might be really interested in something.
Any other questions? All right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much.